Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Gittin, Daf Yud Aleph. We are going to begin on the bottom of Yud Amud Beis by the two dots. So we were learning in yesterday's Mishnah that when it comes to regular documents that are produced in a non-Jewish court system, even if it was signed by Ovdei Kochavim, the din is that it's still kosher, with the exception of Gittin Nashim, that when it comes to a get, absolutely not. It has to be from a Jewish court, it has to be Jewish signatures, as well as Shkori Avadim. Now, Rav Shimon says something fascinating. He says, Af Elu Kasher. Now, we're making an assumption that he's saying that even when it comes to a get, you're able to use Gittin Nashim, a regular divorce, through a non-Jewish court system with non-Jewish signatures. And then he says, the prohibition is only if it's not an expert court. Now, this is very difficult to understand, which is what the Gemara now discusses. How can we possibly say this? The only time a person could be engaged in the process of writing Gittin, signing Gittin, is if they're part of the Parsha of Gittin. But when it comes to Ovdei Kochavim, there's no din, there's no requirement for a non-Jew to have to give a divorce document according to Jewish law. So therefore, they don't have anything to do with these laws, so it doesn't make sense that we should permit these Gittin, these divorce documents written in such court systems. So Amar Rab Zera, Yard Rab Shimon lo shitaso shel Rabbi Eliezer. So Rab Shimon fell into the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. What's that? Diamar Edi Masira Karti. That according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says you don't actually need signatures at all. So what's the problem? The problem is that they're non-Jewish signatures. They're not B'nai Krisos. So what? The reality is you don't need signatures according to him. Even if there's no signatures on the get, it's still valid. So if you have, apparently, so too, even if you do have signatures, if they're written, signed by Ovdei Kochavim, it shouldn't make any difference. So, because he holds in a Masira Karti. What is the separation? What causes the get to be chal? It's the witnesses that saw it being given over. So Gemara says 1 second. As we saw before, and Rashi explains, it's true. If you have a get without any witnesses on it, it is a good get. Nonetheless, this dafka ain't of Adam. That's because there's just no witnesses, because you don't need signatures. But let's say you do have signatures. Then the people that signed it are invalid. That will be problematic. Even though midaraisa shouldn't matter, because again, you don't even need signatures. But the reality is, we have a concern. You may end up relying on these signatures. You may say, oh, we didn't have any Edi Masira. That's okay. Look, we have people that signed this divorce document. They signed the get. So therefore it's okay. But the fact is they're Edim Psulim. So technically you really are supposed to have Edi Masira. And you don't need Edi Chasim at all. But the problem is that if you have invalid signatures on the get, you may rely on it and not even have Edi Masira. So that's a question. The question is, even if he holds Edi Masira like Rabbi Eliezer, but he still wouldn't allow this get to be valid because their signatures are by Ovdei Kochavim. So Hachmai Skin, and as the Gemara continues in Yud Aleph and Aleph, here what are we talking about? How do we answer this question? B'shemus muvhakin, which we mentioned before. If you have clearly non-Jewish names that are signed on this document, in which there's no one that will actually think that these are valid signatures, and therefore no one's going to come to rely on Shemus Muvhakim because these signatures. Says Rashi, Jews just don't have these names. You're not going to rely on these signatures. Why? Everyone's going to look at these signatures and be like, oh, these are non-Jewish signatures. Obviously, they're not valid, and therefore you're going to need the Edi Basira. So that's the point. If you have, it's ironic, but if you actually have like the worst situation, Shemus Muvhakin, non-Jewish names, so they're clearly Ovdei Kochavim, that's when it's good, because in that situation it's clear that we're not reading Saimech on those signatures, and therefore no one's going to have to, there's no need to make a Gezer D'Rabbanan. So, Heichidami, Shemus Muvhakin, what exactly does that mean? What is the case? Somewhere public going, some of the following names, and you'll have to tell me if you know any Jewish people who have these names. I don't know any. Hormiz v'av Danya bar Shivtai uvar Kidri, so far none. Ubati v'nokim una. So these are all names that apparently, at least then, those were all names of judges in who are not Jewish. Well, so what are you trying to tell me? What? That if it's a name which a Jew could have, it's just like a regular Parav name, right? So David, right? So David is not Shemus Muhakin. Now there are a lot of non-Jews with that name, but it certainly could be a Jew by the name of David. So then you're going to tell me if you have those type of signatures, then it doesn't work. So the whole chilik, the whole way we're making distinction is whether we have Shemus Muhakin or not, whether or not we'll be Saimach on this get. So Yahachi at a tiny Seifa, why does the Seifa not split it up in that way? Why does the Seifa instead say, that the whole issue is when the courts are not experts? Why don't we talk about actually courts that are mumchin, they are experts, but you could make the distinction that he'll only be allow such signatures is if they're by non-Jewish names. Now the fact that it doesn't say that must be that we are not making a distinction between shemus muvhakin or not. The verse says no. Hakanami. You're right. It really should have said that. So why does it? Hakanami cover. And this is in fact how you're supposed to read it. That's the only time he'll actually say. That's the only time Rav Shimon will say that we can rely on this, and we can say this is a good get, and we're not concerned that a person is going to make a mistake. It'll have the same din as a situation of a court which is not of experts. Says Rashi, so when it's talking about hedyot, we're saying it's a shar shtaris. It's on other documents, ha'oimdin l'riyah, that are there l'raya, I think, for a proof. The hasam ikla fluge bein hedyot la'arachot. That's how you can make a difference between experts and non-expert courts. The evil will be get isha. When it comes to get isha, it increases hedyot v'archos shavin. It doesn't make any difference when it comes to a get if it's an expert group of judges or a non-expert group of judges. They're of the kachavim. It's not valid. We only say that this get will be puzzle if you have signatures of people whose names are not clearly not Jewish. It's comparable to any other document in which is written or produced by non-expert judges. But the truth is, it doesn't matter if you're an expert judge or non-expert judge. That doesn't make any distinction when it comes to Gittin Nashim. Okay, so that's answer number one. And answer number two, V'boy Seifa, when it mentions the Seifa in our Mishnah, Laton L'Gittin Mamoin. It's actually talking about not a get, Gittin Nashim. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. It doesn't say Gittin Nashim. So therefore, he was really referring to Gittin Mammon, because you're right, a get cannot be, we do not allow non-Jewish signatures. This is how you read it. The documents of monetary cases, so again, that's what we're the distinction is that you could use a non-Jewish court. He's really just explaining the ratio. The Seifa is explaining the ratio. Says Rashi, all documents of money, are a code that came from this professional court. They're all good. Like for example, if there was a sale, we saw in yesterday's daf, that it's really the money that causes the kinyan. The star was sahudi ba'alma. It's like a receipt, as we said. The star really doesn't have much need because the kinyan is through the money. Because after all, if they didn't see the money being transferred from buyer to seller, the basin would never have written a star over there. Okay, tiny back in the Gemara. So Omer Elazar, Rabbi Yosi, Kacha Merem Shimon Chachamim, but Sidain. This is what was said in Sidon. Rabbi Kiva the Chachamim do not disagree, which Rashi says Shehin Dor Shahayil Lefanenu, that was a generation in front of them. Al Kol Shtaros, when in regard to regular documents, Oyel Baruch Shel V'Chachavim, that are written by these professional non-Jewish courts, Shiafal Pi Shechayismein of V'Chachavim Ksherin, that even if the signatures are non-Jews, it's kosher. Yafilu Gittin Nashim Shchorei Avadim, unbelievable. He says that even when it comes to Gittin Nashim, it would still be valid. The whole argument is if they're non-experts. Rabbi Kiva Machshav Chachamim Paislan. So that's where the machlokas is. With the exception of Gittin Nashim Shchorei Avadim, since again we hold Edi Masira Karti, and the Chasimos of the Akum are Shemus Muvhakim, which we are easily be able to recognize that these are non-Jewish names, we're not samach on them. So therefore, even when it comes to a basin of hedyotos, it'll be kosher. Unbelievable. So when we say you have to have an expert group of court, of basin, that's for regular documents. However, it comes to Gittin Nashim, and you have Shemus Muvhakim, so therefore in that situation, because everyone knows you can't be samech on those signatures, it must be because there was Edi Masira. So it's the Edi Masira, the Jewish Edi Masira, that actually validated this get, so therefore it works. These are also kosher in a place where the Yisrael didn't sign. So it's actually an akum that's signing it. But if it's in a situation where a Yisrael signs it, then no, says Rashi. Even though it looks like they're non-Jewish people because they're non-Jewish names, it's still puzzle. Because if you say these are kosher, you may start allowing other people who don't have non-Jewish names, and you also rely on them. So therefore we have to stop somewhere and say that if in fact we know it was an akum signing it, it's kosher when an akum signs it. But if Yisrael signs it and it's Shemus Muvhakim, still we're going to say it's not good. So in a place where the Yisrael doesn't sign but an akum, why don't we make that same gezerah? We should make a decree that why should we say that if an akum signs it and it's Shemus Muvhakim, that we say it's valid, but yet when it comes to Yisrael who signs it with Shemus Muvhakim, it's not valid. Why don't we make a gezerah ha to ha? So Shema b'shma machlif. Literally, a name to a name, you can make a mistake. Ater ba'ater lo machlif. A city to a city, that much you're not going to make a mistake. So what does that mean? So it's basically saying that it's possible when it comes to Shemus Muvhakim to not Shemus Muvhakim, so that you can make a mistake. Shma b'shma machlif. However, Ater ba'ater lo machlif. Literally city to city, which we're talking about an akum signing it versus Yisrael signing it, that much we're not going to make a mistake. Ravina Savar lachshuri b'chenufiyasa de'arma. It's to kasher the gathering of the aramah. So what does that mean? Says Rashi, she'enan arakot, that these are not expert witnesses, expert court, and nonetheless we still say that it works. Amalei Rafram Arkaos Tanan. It says actual courts only. So what do you mean it's to kasher and say it's okay when it comes to non-expert courts? It says Beferish Arkaot. So Amrava Haishtara Parsa. This Shtar Parsa, says Rashi, Shasu B'Lashon Farsi. It was written in Persian. The Chasmu Persium Hedyotos Alav, and the simple Persians signed it. Demasu Nihili B'Apisad Yisrael. So what happened was it was actually given over in the hands by Yisrael. There was Edi Masira properly. Magbinan Be B'nei Chari. The din is that we will allow you to collect from B'nei Chayrin properties that you can even collect. That you can only collect from non-encumbered properties. B'Halo Yada L'Mikra, but he doesn't know how to read. b'diyadeh. He actually does know. It has to be something that cannot be forged, and it's something that could be forged. Says Rashi, shehaklaf matukan ba'afatzin. You have to have the parchment properly prepared with gallnuts. B'shas ibudai shoysim shachar. So the answer is, oh yeah, b'afitzan. That actually, yeah, we use the gallnuts, so that's not the problem. But being at sarch sheyaxer mi'inyono shel shtar b'shitachrona b'lenka, there's a requirement which they may not do, that you need to actually, at the end of the document, review and write again what was on the top of the document, and that's not something which they do. My answer is no, b'd mahadar. They actually did repeat on the last line that which is written at the top of the document. So Yihachi, if that's the case, maybe Shabadi Nami, why do we say that you can only collect from B'nai Chayra? In L'Chayra, you should be able to collect from even encumbered properties. So Leisli Kala, because it doesn't have a kol. Says Rashi, Gafishin Chais Min Yisrael, the Sahadi the Chasimi Ashtara. The ones that signed are the ones who actually create a kol. So that's only by Jewish witnesses who signed. So therefore, since these are non-Jewish people, these are Parsim, so even though they did everything comparable to what is done by Yid, it doesn't make any difference. The din is that there's no kol, because only Yisrael is going to make this kol about what they did, and therefore, because of that, they cannot collect from Nechas Mishubadim. Bamine Reish Lakish Merav Yochanan. I think I had a question on that. Yeah, question TA 9. So let's see that before we go weiter. Ma hadin b'shtar parsa, the chasmi parsim had yotos, alav, umasin lehi bi'api sahadi Yisrael, umadua. So b'nei chayrin you can collect, but not mishubadim. The leisli kala, the edi chasima, mafki l'kala. TA 9. That was TA 9. So, write that here. Okay, weiter. Bomini Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So he asked the following questions. We continue to Yud Aleph Lamed Beis. So he poses the following inquiry: Eidim hachasumim al haget. So you have witnesses that signed on a get, and Rashi says Ume Eretz Yisrael ba, they're coming from Israel. The halol karm in Medinas Yam, because it doesn't say it's coming from Medinas Yam, so we're going to assume they came from Eretz Yisrael. U'shemoyisen kishmoyis av v'chachavim. Now these people, their names are non-Jewish names. Ma, what's the din? Says Rashi, V'yadinan i'ov kachavim ninhu Yisrael. We have no idea whose signature, who these people are that signed it. Are they Jews or non-Jews? Ma hu achshuri be'edi masira. Now we can't rely on these edi chasimos, the signatures, but maybe we could rely on the Edi Masira, and that would be good enough. That's the question according to the sheet of Rashi. So, Taisa says, Perish, mi amrinan di Yisrael ninhu v'kosher. Do we say it's a good get because they're Jews that signed it? Ura Meir. Or Edi Masir or Rabbi Lezer, or maybe we hold Edi Masir like Rabbi Lezer. We're not going to assume it's non-Jew signing it. Maybe this status quo is there was a Jew that signs a get, and unless you know for a fact it was an Kachavim, we can just assume it was a kosher Yid. It's not really a milsa de shchicha that a non-Jew is going to be signing Gittin. Oh, Dilmar, perhaps as Taisus. Since these names are non-Jewish names, there's actually a problem that these names are really not normal Jewish names. They're non-Jewish names. So therefore, maybe in fact it wasn't over Chachavim. We have to be concerned. Skipping a line, Taisus, because even according to Ram Shimon, he only said it was kosher if they're shemus mufhakim, if you knew they were non-Jewish names, and therefore you're not going to be samech on them, and therefore you'll rely on Eidich Masira. V'hacha hem shemus she'en mufhakim. Daham masavkinan, we're not sure we don't know if it's Jew or not. But shemus mufhakim, if in fact we know for a fact, there's no doubt. So basically, it means that these are names that it's not mamish shemus mufhakim, but these are names that are not typically Jewish names, but they're not necessarily non-Jewish names only either. So therefore, it is possible that the person who signed it is Jewish, but we're not sure. So that's the question. So Amrulay back in the morning, Lobo Liadenu El Lukas Faluz. It only came into our hands regarding a get that non-Jews signed it. One who signed it, his name was Lucas, and then the guy's name was Luz. V'hichsharnu. And we said that we allowed it not through them, but through the Edi Masira. V'davka Lucas V'luz. The reason why is Lo Shlichi Yisrael Tomsky B'Shemosaihu. These are not names that are typically given to a Jew. Says Rashi, Sheshemus Mubhakinhain. These are, it's like Tosfos explained, these are 100% or almost guaranteed, these are Shemus Mubhakim of non-Jews. And therefore, V'losim Mismachalayu, says Rashi, you're not going to come to rely on these signatures, and therefore you're going to be relying on the Edi Masira. Avol Shemahasa Achrina, any other names, the Shlichi Yisrael, the Tomsky B'Shemahasaihu Lo, where it's shaykh that maybe a Yid will use these names, so then we're not going to allow it. We're going to be nervous and not allow it. Not that these are acceptable Edi Chasimos, but maybe we'll continue the Gezerah, even that we're not going to rely on the Edi Masira either. Because if we start relying on it, people are going to start thinking that the Chasimus alone are good, even without the Edi Masira. Esvei. Gittin haboim and b'dinasiyam. Let's say you have Gittin that came from another country, the Edim Chasum and you have witnesses on them, even though you know for a fact these are non-Jewish names, it's good. And here's the reason, and this is interesting. The question is, the majority of the people outside, these are they do also embrace names that Ol Chachavim have. So it's a question. It is still kosher, not just like by the names of Lucas Faluz, in which are very, very, very clear. Those two names will not be given over. Those are Shemus Mubhakim. No, when it comes to all other Shemus Mubhakim, even beyond Lucas Faluz, outside of Chutz La'aretz, we'll still rely on them. So Hasa, we'll rely on the Edi Masira. Where it says Hasam Kediktani Taima. You have to look at the reason. It's because of Gufa that the majority of the people in Chutz La'aretz, they actually do embrace these other names. So only in Chutz La'aretz, which means, but in Eretz Yisrael, like we said, maybe this is the case above, it's talking about Eretz Yisrael, when the names are Shemus Mubhakim, is the get going to be kosher. In Chutz La'aretz, we are more makel to say it's kosher, as these names are likely Jews that signed. Okay, that's a question that was answered in that way. Question 9. Eidim hachasumim al get. So you have witnesses that signed. V'shemosam their names are like Chachamim. Mahul achshir be'edi masira. So will we allow edi masira? So it depends if it's in Israel or Chutz La'aretz. The answer is like this. Be'eretz Israel, so Israel that a Jew doesn't have non-Jewish people names. So in kosher el b'shemos mubhakin. So it's only going to be kosher if these names are not, which are shemos mubhakim, which are non-Jewish names, because they're 100% they're non-Jews, because the people in Eretz Israel don't have those names. Therefore, dulasim mismachal, you're not going to come to rely on them because you're going to know these are not these are non-Jews that signed it. However, b'chutz la'aretz the shchiach Yisrael b'shemos akum kosher. And in Chutz La'aretz, when shchiach, that's possible a Jew may have these other names, so therefore we're going to end up saying that, in fact, it is kosher. Okay. Let's see the next Mishnah. Masnisan. Ha'imr tain. We're going to focus on that word in the Gemara. A person says, give get zel ishti. Give this get to my wife. Ushtar shecher zel avdi. Give this document to my slave. And then, as the shliach has it, and he's walking over to the evident to the Isha, Rameir holds that you could retract. Says Rashi, before it gets into their hands. Obviously, once it gets in their hand, that's too late. But Yaksar, says Rashi, what's Sarko, the Chayiv Hulahen. We're going to see that the Shliach, when he accepts it, he cannot just also be accepting it on behalf of the Eved or the Isha, because it's a chayv. It may not be a good thing that a woman is getting divorced, or this, interesting enough, that Eved should go free. There's problems, and therefore they would not necessarily want to go free or to become a divorced, and therefore he cannot accept it on her behalf, and therefore they would only be divorced or freed once it's given over. So if he retracts in the middle, then it's a good retraction. Chacham Amrim, it depends. The Gittin Nashim, that's true when it comes to Gittin Nashim, because again, a woman doesn't want to end this relationship. Of a little bit Shchorei Vadim. Now when it comes to Shchorei Vadim, in that situation, it's not the case. So by Gittin Nashim, he could retract, because it's not good for a woman to get divorced. But when it comes to being free, this guy wants to be free, right? Why? It's a schus, the fact that I don't have to be a slave anymore. So I'm happy that you accepted the get on my behalf the second that my master gave it to you, the shliach. And therefore, everyone holds my woman, it doesn't work. So why is it good for a slave to go free? Because a slave can end up not even getting food. The master has the ability to withhold food. But you have an obligation of you have to give food to your wife. And therefore, because of that, it's good for the woman to stay, because she knows she's getting mazonos. Armulahen, so this is 1 second, but haru poiselas avdai min a truma, kashem shu poiselas ishto. It's not so great for an Eved to go free, because now he can't eat truma. The reason why is not really it's a chov, it's just a reality that the only time he could eat truma is when he is within your possession. However, once that's not the situation anymore, he goes free. But it's just a technicality. But the reality is he has no obligation to give anything to him, and therefore, because of that, when it comes to the Eved, at least according to the Chachamim, once the Shchorei Eved is given over to the Shliach, that's it. He is able to go free, and he cannot retract. Says the Gemara, Yosef Rav Huna Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef committed Rav Yirmiyah. They were sitting in front of Rav Yirmiyah. Yosef Rav Yirmiyah become a name. He was dozing off a little bit. The Yosef Rav Huna became Rav Huna was sitting, and he said the following: Shema Mina. We can deduce mid Rabbanan, according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, as Rashi says, the Amri Shashliach Yitvais Hashtar L'Tzarech Eved, regarding he holds that a shliach can actually be typhus the star on behalf of the Eved, because it's a good thing to go free. So typhus l'bal chayiv kana. So it's the same thing that if you're a shliach and you're holding on to some type of financial reimbursement, so that's a good thing also. Says Rashi, Adam in a shuk shetayfes metaltali. If you have someone that holds onto the metaltal, but nechsi ruvain, with Sar Shimon shehu bal chayiv kana, he's kinda this metaltal. Even a situation where it's bad for the master, because it's bad for the master to lose his Eved. So this is actually Lashon She'eluhu. This is a question. How do we possibly say that you could be, you can do this, because maybe you could be a shliach only in a situation where it's not chav l'cherem, but here, by you doing this, you're making it bad for the Eved, because for the master, because the master can no longer retract. So Amalei in doesn't make any difference. Even when it's chav l'cherem, it works. Adhachi, in the meanwhile, Itar, he woke up. Itar b'hu Rabbi Yirmiyah, he woke up from his dozing. Armahu Dardiki, my young one, which is maybe not the most complimentary statement. It doesn't work. You can't do this. But our Mishnah implies that the shliach is kona. That's because in our Mishnah it says the word tenu. And kol armor tenu, when the master says, give it, ka'omer zachu dami. It's akin to him actually saying that you can acquire it on his behalf. Says Rashi, ve'en zeh kashar typhus. This is not a regular situation. He's holding on to the metaltalon. El baal oisa shliach l'zachisbo. The baal is actually making him into a shliach to be zoichet for him. Yavla b'yisha eved l'yada, even if the eved doesn't know about it. Zachal l'adam shalafan, if it works. So therefore, the fact that he said tain get zel avdi, so according to the Chachamim, so no, you cannot retract anymore, because the fact that he said tenu doesn't make any difference, even if it's chav l'cherim. Normally that would not work. However, since he said tenu, it's like he said zacha, and therefore the shliach, it's like the Baal said to the shliach that yes, you can be zayich, you can acquire it on behalf of the eved, and it works even if the eved doesn't know about it, and therefore the husband can no longer retract. This whole concept is really a machlokas, as we're going to see. Ditnan, as we learn, it says as follows: Mi shaliket es a peah, a person who is gathering up peah, says Rashi, Baal habayis ashir, is a wealthy guy. Shaliket es a peah, and he gathered up the corners. Behind makam shechav la'aniyim. It's obviously bad for the poor, because the poor want to be able to collect it too. So let's say he gathers up peah. So how does he have a right to do it? He's not poor. But Omer, he says, Hari ani. I'm collecting it for a poor person. So he can be koined on someone else's behalf. Now that's obviously b'makom shechav l'cherim, because even though it's good that you're collecting it for poor person number one, you're hurting poor person number two, that he no longer has rights or ability to get it. So maybe it doesn't work. Rabbi Lezer says no. You can be zaychus something. You could typhus or bal chayiv kana even makom shechav l'cherim. It doesn't matter what you said. You still it doesn't work. You cannot be koined for ani, a particular ani. Rather, it's necessary that no matter what you say, the first person is able to get it. So, which means because he holds makom shechav l'cherim, you can't do this. So maybe that's a right. So as we continue to Yud Beis Amud Aleph, not necessarily. Dilma loihi. Maybe you cannot compare this case to the case of gathering up produce for the poor, because ad kanol kam Rabbi Lezer hasam. Maybe the only reason why Rabbi Lezer is of the opinion over there and says that you could do this even though you're rich, because you don't have to be rich. Hasam el demigu di boy mafro hu nechase v'havi ani v'chazile. Since there's amigu, you technically can just make yourself poor. You can be mafker everything, and all of a sudden you can collect things for yourself. And therefore, amigu the zachal anashi, since you can acquire it for yourself, zachal chavre, so they can acquire it for your friend. Abel hachalo, but over here, there's no. You can't obviously. Being mafker your possessions has nothing to do with this eved going free or not. Yad kan lo kamar rabbanon hasam el dechsev lo salaki lo ani. It says explicitly, do not gather for the poor. Lo salaki lo lo ani. So the drasha is to him. You cannot specifically collect for another poor person. So it's almost like gzer sakasav of a hachalo, but over here there's no such gzer sakasav, so actually it would work. Rabbi Lezer hai lo salaket my ovidle. What does he do with that pasuk? Meboile lahazir lo ani al shalo. That if the ani has a field, he too must leave it for others, for other aniyim, than for just himself. Question 10, then we'll stop. Madua ein raya the hatayfas of al-chayiv kana but not to get ze l'abdi enu chayizer, because since he said the word tenu is akin to saying kizachudami, and then the question continues. U'medanami shaliket esapeva oimer harazil ploini ani Rabbi Lezer oimer zacha. So maybe only there, because you could be mafker only nechasim, and therefore because of that you could keep it for yourself. And migu, since you can keep it for yourself, so therefore the ani will be able to get it as well. Ad kan.